All right, well, hello, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. We may have a few more people join us, but just in the interest of time, just want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Just by way of introduction, my name is Ryan Jannos. I'm one of the Associate Directors of Admission here at Villanova, and will sort of serve as the moderator for today's discussion. Before we begin, just a couple housekeeping items. At the bottom of the Zoom window, you should see an icon that reads Q&A. This is sort of how we will monitor questions. So if you have any general questions, please feel free to write those in the box and could submit them to us. If you find that your question is more specific or maybe more personal to your own circumstances, you might be more comfortable addressing those in an individual meeting, and we'll be following up with an email after this session with instructions on how to sign up for a one-on-one meeting with a counselor in the Office of Financial Assistance. So before we get started, just a quick congratulations to everybody. For students that are joining us, congrats, and any parents or guardians, congratulations to you as well. I know that there are a few of you who have already decided to enroll and have officially committed to Villanova, and we're super excited to welcome you to campus in the fall. And for those that are still, trying to figure some things out, just know that both of our offices are here and available sort of to you. If you would like to reach the Office of Admission, go to vu@villanova.edu is the email, and finaid@villanova.edu for financial assistance, and we'll make sure to put those links into the chat box for everyone to see. But before I introduce my colleagues in the Office of Financial Assistance, I just wanted to take a few moments to address merit-based scholarships, as those are typically awarded outside of our office. So first, it's important to note here that the lion's share of financial resources available for students are allocated toward need-based assistance, right? So less than 2% of our applicant pool will receive a merit-based scholarship. So right off the bat, it is a very small number of students who will receive a merit award here at Villanova, again, as most of the resources are allocated elsewhere. So that being said, all merit scholarships have been awarded at this time, and we are unfortunately not able to offer an appeals process there for merit specifically, or consider scholarship offerings from other colleges or universities that you may have received. So I just wanted to make sure to be as transparent as possible. I wish I had better news to share, but that is the situation that we're in. But please know that we are committed to providing financial resources to families in order to make attending Villanova a reality. And so to help us talk a little bit more about those pieces, I'd like to introduce both Margaret Moyer and Nathan Walch from the Office of Financial Assistance. So I will turn it over to you guys.
Great, thank you, Ryan. Good afternoon, everyone. As Ryan had said, my name is Nathan Walch. I'm Associate Director of Financial Assistance here at Villanova, and I'm here with my colleague Margaret Moyer, who's our Senior Associate Director of Financial Assistance. So I know that in today's unprecedented times, there's a lot of uncertainty that's going around, and so financing your college education is definitely a paramount concern for many people. So we wanted to go over a presentation today to answer a lot of the frequently asked questions about the financial aid process, the award package, how it's generated, financing options after that, and some information about what to expect after you have chosen to be a member of the Villanova community as far as next steps. So I'm going to share my screen here right now so you can see our.
And while Nate is going over the presentation, I'm going to try to answer some of your questions. Again, we'll go over more of the general questions here during this presentation, but I would encourage you to keep any specific questions you may have, in relation to your situation or your student for when you schedule your appointment with a counselor, and we can address them then.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Margaret. So as we're starting, we just wanted to provide a little fast fact information about the financial assistance for the current freshman class for the 2019-2020 academic year. $22.5 million was accepted in need-based Villanova University grant assistance for our current freshman class, and the average financial aid award was $34,158. 84.4% of those eligible for need-based aid received need-based Villanova University grant funding, and the average need-based package for students with demonstrated need was $41,851. So this included grant funding, loan funding through the federal government, and student employment, which is commonly known as your work-study opportunities. This does exclude any alternative loan funding, such as private loans or PLUS loan funding. Some important notes as you are going through this process, as the May 1st decision deadline is coming closer and closer, is to please continue to check your applicant status page to see if there's any additional documentation that our office is requiring in order to finalize your financial aid notice. A lot of the forms that you need to complete, if they are outstanding, are available on our website at finaid.villanova.edu. There's an important form section where you can obtain these forms. Once you have confirmed that you will be joining the Villanova community, you'll be given the information to set up what's known as your MyNova student portal. This sort of replaces the applicant status page, and this is what you'll be using throughout your next 4 years at Villanova. When you get access to your MyNova portal, that's where you'll be going online to either accept or decline any of the awards that you've been offered for the upcoming academic year. So it's important once you have submitted that tuition deposit to go on to MyNova to accept your awards. So when your financial aid was being reviewed, this was the results of your FAFSA, the pre-application for federal student aid, and the CSS profile. These forms are used to determine what's called the expected family contribution, or EFC. When you file the information, you may have noticed that we asked for documentation to be provided to our office, because we do check the information that was provided on the FAFSA and profile to make sure that there were no errors that were made, because sometimes students added an extra zero as far as income that could have affected the expected family contribution. So we really wanted to make sure that that information was as accurate as possible. So we reconciled any differences based upon that supporting information. The FAFSA information is used to determine your federal and state aid eligibility, whereas the FAFSA and profile combined are used to what's determined our institutional need-based funding, more commonly known as the Villanova grant. So when need-based aid is packaged, there's a very simple formula that's used to help determine a student's financial need. It's looking at the cost of attendance of the school minus the expected family contribution is calculated by the FAFSA and profile, and that remaining portion reflects the student's overall financial need. So cost of attendance is the student's education-related expenses that identify the maximum amount of financial assistance a student can receive within an academic year. So financial assistance is basically any source of funding that a student is eligible to receive by virtue of being enrolled in a degree-seeking program. So for example, the federal student aid you are eligible for through the FAFSA, if you're eligible for any sort of tuition reimbursement from your parent's employer, if you're the recipient of an outside scholarship, if you received any of the departmental scholarships or merit scholarships through the university, or any additional loan funding that you take out after these other awards are all determined to be financial assistance. And so we can't exceed that amount, so it's to help students make sure they're not incurring more debt than they need to take out within an academic year. So cost of attendance is divided into two different costs: direct expenses, which are billed by Villanova directly. So these are the things that will appear on your V-bill, which we'll be discussing a little bit later in the presentation. So these are your tuition, your fees, your housing, and your meal plan, also known as your room and board. Indirect expenses are education expenses that are not billed by Villanova directly, but they're expenses that you may incur while you're a student. So these are things such as your books and supplies, your transportation to and from school during holidays, for example, miscellaneous personal expenses, because you still have toiletries. You and your friends may order pizza on the weekend just to kind of unwind after a long week of classes. And also the loan fees, which we'll be talking about a little bit later in the presentation as well, are all considered indirect expenses that comprise the cost of attendance. So when we're awarding financial aid information, we award based upon a certain order in which the financial aid award information goes through. So for example, if as part of the FAFSA, students qualify for the federal Pell Grant funding, that's one of the first pieces that the university takes into account. The Pell Grant funding is based upon the expected family contribution that's calculated by the FAFSA. So if you are within that range, that pretty much stays consistent from school to school. The federal SEOG grant funding is the next step. So students who are eligible for the federal Pell Grant are then considered for SEOG grant funding. So every school is given a finite amount of funding that they then award to their student population, and it's normally going to the students who demonstrate the highest financial need. The next component is federal work study. So federal work study is your opportunity to get a job on campus where the hours that you work, the source of your paycheck is from that federal work study fund. Federal work study is a wonderful opportunity because it allows you to work around your class schedule, because the departments that are hiring work study students know that you are a student first and you have classes, study time, maybe other extracurricular activities that you wanted to be a part of. So they really try to find students whose schedule coincides with when they need that additional assistance to help cover those expenses. Work study does not get deducted directly from your expenses at Villanova. However, it's important to keep that in mind. These funds go directly to the student in a form of a paycheck. So you would either pick up that paycheck from the bursar's office, or you can sign up for a direct deposit to get that information going through. So it is important to know that when your first V-bill goes out, you will not see work study being deducted from that, because those funds, the student works those hours and then receives the paycheck to help cover those indirect expenses that I mentioned previously. For students who are accepted to the College of Nursing are eligible to be reviewed for a federal nursing loan. So this is a loan that has a low interest that students that are in the nursing program can apply for to help with some additional financing. If you are awarded that information, there is some additional information that you'll be signing so that you know all of your rights and responsibilities and the terms and conditions of those nursing loans. But it's important to look into that as well. Next, we look at the federal direct loan funding. So federal direct loan funds are in the form of the subsidized and unsubsidized direct loan. This is information that the subsidized loan is a need-based fund where the Department of Education is actually paying the interest for students while they're in school, whereas unsubsidized direct loan funds, the interest is occurring while the student's in school, and they are responsible for that interest. You do have the ability to defer that interest, or you can pay the interest while you're in school. You can make that option later on in the summer. For students who are eligible for the Pennsylvania State Grant, known as the FIA grant, that's the next piece that's taken into account, because not all students are eligible for state funding, or students may reside in a state that unfortunately does not have state grant funding that crosses state lines. If you do live in a state that does have what's called a reciprocal agreement, where the funds are able to go to out of state to another school that also has a state grant program that goes to that state, it's important to check with them to make sure that you meet any eligibility requirements for those additional funds. Finally is when we look at the Villanova University grant to then review, based upon your remaining need, how much additional funding is coming from Villanova directly. If students are awarded any of the merit funding that Ryan had mentioned previously, that is also considered a resource before all those other sources of aid, because that's something you got based upon your academic achievements. So it is important that when you're thinking about whether or not you want to accept federal loans, if you look at students who have accepted loans for all 4 years that they have attended Villanova, this resulted in an overall loan borrowing of $27,000. The amount that you're eligible to receive each year is based upon your grade level, so the year in school, based upon the number of credits that you've completed thus far. The majority of our students do start off as a freshman level, so you'll see $5,500 in the federal direct loan funding. Up to $3,500 of that can be in the subsidized loan. Once you move up into your sophomore year status, your eligibility goes up to $6,500, which is $4,500 subsidized and $2,000 unsubsidized. At your junior and senior level, you receive your maximum annual eligibility, which is $7,500. And again, that's per academic year, up to $5,500 that could be subsidized. This is important because this is a great way to help students establish credit once they enter the repayment 6 months after they graduate from Villanova. So unlike a credit card where after you have paid off some of the balance, you have that funding available to spend some more, this is something where you're repaying that loan debt down and it's just helping you cover those balances. The majority, like about 60% of your FIGO score is based upon making consistent on-time monthly payments. So for example, if you sign up for a direct deposit to have a monthly debit deducted from your bank account to cover your student loans. That's a great way to make sure you make those consistent on-time monthly payments. And ultimately, it is a small investment for a great education. So when you look at your financial aid award package, you may have noticed the section that said other funding opportunities with a remaining amount for the cost of attendance. So the other funding opportunities is not something that you already have automatically. This is to let you know how, based upon the cost of attendance and how much other aid you're receiving, how much in additional assistance you can take out to cover your remaining expenses for the academic year. Other funding opportunities, and we're going to go each of these step by step, are outside scholarships, the Villanova University tuition payment plan, the federal direct parent plus loan, and private education loans. So we're going to discuss all these a little bit more in depth, but just know that for all of these different options, students do have additional action in order to apply for these opportunities. So first we have the outside scholarships. So scholarships are a student-directed search process to help identify other funds that you are not required to pay back. So most students do start this process via an online search. If you look on the Office of Financial Assistance website, we do have an outside scholarship site link that does have some additional scholarship opportunities. Unfortunately, because a lot of these outside scholarship opportunities have specific guidelines in order for students to qualify for those funds, unfortunately, we don't always know whether the student meets those criteria or if the student does have that eligibility. The important thing to stress with the outside scholarship search process is when you're doing it online, this should be a free process. If you see sites that ask you to pay some sort of application fee, I would skip those, because if you do a little bit more digging, you can find those same resources for free as well. It's important to check with your parents' employers. Sometimes they do have some additional educational benefits that they can offer to help families reduce some of their additional expenses. It's important to check with your community organizations and churches to see if they have any additional scholarship opportunities. Your guidance counselor's office may have some additional databases and applications that you can look into. And other professional organizations for the major that you're in may sometimes have additional scholarship funding opportunities for students as well. Even if you see a scholarship that's only $250, it's still $250 that you can use to help cover some of your remaining expenses for your Villanova education. In the event that you are receiving any outside scholarships, students are required to notify the Office of Financial Assistance, because the Department of Education does determine these to be financial assistance. So we do have to incorporate these as part of your financial aid award package. So the next step is the Villanova University tuition payment plan. So this is a program that's administered through our bursar's office, who also generate the V-bill that, again, I'll be discussing later on. This allows families to take the remaining tuition that they have for the year and break it up into smaller monthly payments of 10 months. So normally this would start before the academic year has begun and carry on through to the end of the academic year. However, it makes it so that families aren't required to pay the full amount right at the beginning of the year. They can break it up and make it more manageable. For more information on how to apply, you would go to villanova.afford.com. And you can use this form or the payment plan in conjunction with other loan options that I'll be discussing next. So that this way you don't have to incur the full amount in loan debt, but you also don't have to make as large monthly payments, because you are able to offset. So it's a really great way to, as a debt management tool. So parents of dependent undergraduate students are eligible to apply for the Federal Direct Plus loan. So PLUS is an acronym that actually stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. So the Parent Plus loan is what's known as a cost-less aid loan. So what this means is that they're looking at the cost of attendance from the school minus any other financial assistance that the student is eligible for, and the parents can apply for the Plus loan for those remaining expenses. The Parent Plus loan, some of the benefits of that is that it has a fixed interest rate. So every year, Congress votes on what the interest rate is going to be, and it stays locked in at that loan. So if in the following year the interest rate does go up, your previous loan stays locked in at that lower interest rate. While next year's loan may have a little bit higher of an interest rate, it helps as far as the amount of interest that can accrue on that loan for you, because your previous loan is locked in at that lower rate. The loan fees that I was talking about before in the indirect expenses, these are what the origination fees are talking about. the Department of Education deducts a processing fee known as the origination fee before they send the funds to Villanova. So whatever amount that you have requested, 4.236% less is what actually comes to Villanova. So it's important when you're applying for that loan, you can take that portion into account, and we'll take those loan fees into account. So this way, the amount that you actually were expecting to come to Villanova is the amount that gets received. Another benefit of the Parent Plus loan is that there's no aggregate or annual limit for that. So with that cost less aid loan for each of the 4 years, you could realistically use that to cover any remaining expenses for your student for the remaining 4 years at Villanova. There is a credit check required. However, they use what's known as a simplified credit check. So instead of looking at things like debt to income ratio that private education loans will look at, they're looking more at adverse credit history. So this is important that sometimes families, if they may not qualify for a private education loan, they may qualify for the federal Parent Plus loan instead. Another benefit of this is payments can be deferred until 6 months after the student graduates. So this way you have the option to not start paying on the principal of the loan until the student graduates, but you could pay the interest that is accruing on this loan, that 7% that I was talking about before. You don't have to worry about deciding which option to go through right now, because even the Plus loan application won't be available until about early May for the 2020-2021 academic year. So we'll be sending additional information in June with more information on how to apply for these other options. Excuse me. So next we have private educational loans. So private educational loans are done through a lending institution of your choice. So ultimately you are looking at a bank that is looking at your credit check to see what interest rate they may be able to offer you. Sometimes families don't know where to start. So Villanova has done some research of lenders that Villanova students have used in the past to create what's known as the Villanova Preferred Lenders List, which is available on our Elm Select website. This is a wonderful tool where you can see loans that other Villanova students have used in the past and can compare them to one another to see how they match up. Private education loans, the interest rates could either be fixed, which means the interest rate stays locked in throughout the entire time that you have the loan, or it may be a variable interest rate loan where the interest can fluctuate throughout the entire time that you're holding this loan. Depending upon the type of private educational loan you apply for, the loan could be either in the student's name or it could be in the parent's name. While payments are usually deferred until after the student graduates, it's very important to check with the lender before you apply to see what their terms and conditions in regards to repayment and when repayment would start is going to be. Again, you don't need to make that information right now because it's also possibly a little bit too soon to start applying for those loans. So we send more information in June when it's time to really think about how to apply for those next steps. So as we know, especially with the current COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of families are experiencing some changes in circumstances. When you do have these changes in financial circumstance, it's very important to get in contact with our office to see if any adjustments to your financial aid notice can be made. In some cases, there's an additional form that we have students fill out, which is called the request for revision form. So these are kind of the most common examples where adjustments can be made to the FAFSA and profile based upon the family's circumstances and the supporting documentation that is needed. So for example, changes resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic, changes in the parent's employment, the death of a parent or relative, divorce or separation, loss of untaxed income, or the case of total and permanent disability are all cases in which a request for revision may be required. If you do have an information that's not with that real quick, you can also send an email to us to fin8@villanova.edu. We'll be happy to discuss that information as well. So after you have confirmed that you will be a member of the Villanova community, the first piece to know after you register for your classes is that the bursar's office will generate billing statements known as the V-bill. This is administered through the bursar's office and it's always done electronically. Students get this notification so that they can log into their MyNova student portal and access the e-bill. You'll be notified every time a new V-bill has been generated. It is important that you can also authorize your parents to receive this notification and they're given a separate login for security purposes so the student isn't giving their username and password to their parents in order to access the same information. The first V-bills are generated in July with an August due date. and you are billed on a semester by semester basis. However, since the charges and the student's financial aid tends to be pretty equal between the 2 semesters, that's why the VU payment plan does still offer a 10-month payment plan, so you can still spread out your expenses over a longer period of time to make the payments a little bit more manageable per month. The final piece to always notice, because we do get this question a lot, no paper bills are ever sent. It's a green initiative to really make sure that we're not killing all the trees. So it is important that you keep an eye on your Villanova email, and that your parents, that you give your parents that authorization to get that notification, so you can always see the status of the V-bill. So when students are applying for financial aid, unfortunately, you are required by federal guidelines to reapply for financial aid each academic year. However, the returning student deadline is pushed back a lot further than it was for this current process. So students are required to file by April 1st each year. You have to redo the CSS profile and the FAFSA information. Our office does send out postcards, emails, and other notifications to students and parents to let them know that it's time to reapply. These notifications are normally sent around February. After that, any additional notifications that are sent to the student are going to be sent to their Villanova email account, and they're directed to look on their Mindova student portal for any additional updates. So it is really important for students, once they become a member of the Villanova community, to make sure that they're actively looking at their Villanova email. All notifications are sent to the student, so it is very important that if you have parents, family members, or other loved ones who want to help you keep track of your financial aid information, it's very important to communicate with them whenever you get any notices to make sure that they're in the loop as well. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to email us at finaid@villanova.edu. Unfortunately, right now, our phone number is not available since the campus is closed due to the COVID-19 situation. But we did want to make sure you have that information so that when the campus is reopened, you do have the information available. But after the presentation, you will be getting an email if you would like to set up a video appointment to meet with a financial aid counselor to go over any specific questions that you have. A lot of helpful resources are also available on the Office of Financial Assistance website at finaid.villanova.edu. So thank you so much. I know we covered a lot of information, but we are going to make sure that we actively use the question and answer portion to go over any questions. If we see any questions that are very important for others to know, we're going to be also mentioning that information to the chat as well. Excuse me.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for those that are including their questions in the Q&A box. Please feel free, again, particularly if you have any general questions for Maggie or Nate, please feel free to do so, and we'll do our very best to answer as many questions as possible. And again, just to reiterate, if you do have a question that maybe we can't get to due to timing or is more specific or personal to your own experiences, just another plug, we will be sending an email with a link to schedule a time for you to meet with a counselor individually.
Yes, so there's one question that I did notice. Someone asked about parents getting access to the V-bill portal. If you go onto the bursar's office website, bursar.villanova.edu, there's a step-by-step process on how the students will be able to complete that authorization. Just as a heads up, those students have to have access to their Mindova student portal in order to complete those steps. There's a question about for the 10-month payment plan of about when when it's recommended to set up that payment plan. When the notifications are sent out in June, that's the earliest that families would be able to start signing up for that information. There's also a question about for the request for revision, is it recommended to submit it via email or via the Dropbox? We recommend that any Villanova specific forms that you receive from our office, definitely make sure that you provide it to our secure Dropbox so that that information gets over to our office in a much faster and secure manner.
I do see a question about will the video be available for replay? And yes, we were able to record this webinar, and we will put that on the online resources webpage where students went to sign up for the event in general. And we just put the link into the chat box as well.
There's a question on if changes will be made to tuition if distance learning is required. Since we're unsure of what the status is going to be for the fall semester, we haven't really had that discussion yet. But as soon as information becomes available, I'm sure it'll be posted via the Villanova website or communicated, as an update via email to any deposited or enrolled students. So again, unfortunately, we don't have that information available as of yet. Nate, are you aware what the average cost increase is from year to year?
So unfortunately, we never know exactly, just because that is determined by the Board of Trustees each year. We do recommend for financing to anticipate approximately a 4% increase for tuition, room and board approximately. But again, we never know, but we usually recommend, as far as from a financing perspective, to anticipate approximately 4%.
Thank you. Fall bills will be generated in, there was a question about the tuition for the fall after they deposit. That information sent out in July?
Correct. Yep. The first billing information is sent out in July with an August due date. And then the spring bills are normally available in late November, early December, as registration opens in about mid-November for our undergraduate students. So basically what drives the bill each semester is registration. So once you register for each semester, shortly thereafter is when the billing statement for the following semester will be on there. But again, the students will see all of their scheduled financial aid for that upcoming semester as well.
Thank you. There's also a question, has Villanova made any type of adjustments for those affected by coronavirus where tuition and deposits are concerned, or flexibility in payment plans? So if there are issues with making the $700 deposit and you want to discuss the option of a payment plan, you can email Candace Keith in admissions directly about setting up a payment plan or what sort of options may be available if you're looking to with help on the deposit. If you did have a change in your circumstances due to coronavirus, Nate had mentioned you can complete the request for revision form available on our website or send an email to our office with information regarding it for us to review. So we have been reviewing a lot of cases where people have had issues with either affording tuition or affording the deposit. So please reach out to us if you are having issues. Another question about will the request for revision decision be available before May 1st? That's all dependent on when it was received and reviewed. I would encourage you to have that conversation with a financial aid counselor to check the status of that. They could probably give you an update to see where that stands, but I cannot say with certainty it will be reviewed by May 1st. So a question out there regarding 529 payments. Usually what happens with the 529 payments is you have to fill out an application to your 529 holder and let them know where you'll be sending or how much you want to withdraw and where to send it to. You know, I would say you'd probably want to initiate that once you get your bill for the fall. Submit the application to your 529 holder with the amount that you're going to need distributed for the fall term. That way, at the time you receive the bill, you know how much you actually need to request. And it wouldn't be probably a bad idea to get a copy of the application you submit just in case that there's holdup or an issue, just so that you can, you know, let the bursar know it's in the works, that the money's coming. There are instructions on the website. There's a question about instructions on the portal for adding required documents via the Dropbox. If you go to the Office of Financial Assistance homepage and go to the Dropbox and important forms section, you can go to use Dropbox now, and then it just has you put the student's name and ID number in, and then you just attach whatever file you want to upload, and then you upload it from there. So it's a very simple process. But if you have any issues, please feel free to email our office or address it with a counselor should you set up a meeting. But we haven't really had many user issues with it. It had gone down every now and then when we did a system update, but as far as I know, it has been working well lately. And then Ryan, I don't know if you want to address, there's a question about flexibility on the May 1st deadline to commit.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
That's okay. So someone had asked.
Here, yes. So excuse me. So at this point in time, our deadline is still May 1, which is coming up next Friday. For anyone that has any specific concerns, particularly as they relate to COVID-19, I would strongly encourage you to email our office, again, at gotovu@villanova.edu. Again, that email address is in the chat box. So we can address those questions in detail for you there.
So there are questions about receiving your financial aid packet or concerns that you haven't received it yet. You know, those are a little specific where we're going to have to look into it to determine, you know, what the current status is, if everything's submitted, if it's been reviewed. So for those of you who are looking to check on the status of your financial aid package, I would really encourage you to schedule an appointment with a counselor or email the FinAid office so that we can look into that specifically for you. We won't be able to look into that at this moment. So I can't say for sure if you'll receive it by May 1st. It all depends on where we're at with it. So please schedule an appointment with a counselor or email our office directly, and we'll be happy to look into that for you. And again, in order to arrange a one-on-one meeting with a financial aid representative, I just saw that a question about that came through. You will be receiving an email after this presentation with a link to schedule an appointment with a financial aid counselor. So that will be forthcoming. There's another question on here that's a little specific to a person's financial aid package. You know, it's along the lines of they've received a financial aid package, but documentation was submitted after the fact and that the award may change. That's definitely something that I would address with a financial aid counselor. So if you have any concerns about your financial aid packet changing due to, you know, documentation being submitted later, or you want someone to take another look at something, definitely schedule an appointment with a financial aid counselor and we can go over that with you. Students, there's a question about ROTC scholarships. They do pay, and if they pay Villanova directly, yes, the funding does come to Villanova directly. And there's a question on here, if you weren't eligible for a grant your first semester or first year, do you have a chance of being eligible the next year? So let's say, you know, for this year you didn't have any financial need. In the future, Nate, and feel free to jump in on this, if they do end up showing financial need, we will evaluate for need-based university funding.
Correct. So that's one of the other important components about reapplying for financial aid each academic year. For example, right now, the family may only have one family member in college. So based upon the Department of Education's calculations for expected family contribution, the CSS profiles calculations, when, if in the following year you now have 2 family members in college, so if a younger sibling is now in college as well, that could have an impact on the expected family contribution. So in the second year and going forward, if both siblings are in college, that could have an impact, so students may demonstrate need in the following year. So it is important to see that information. In general, if your financial situation stays relatively steady from year to year, then unfortunately those circumstances may not qualify for additional aid, but there's always changes in circumstances based upon the tax year in which you're filling out the information and based upon the family information for the following year.
Thank you, Nate. There's a question here. Can you pay your V bill via credit card? Yes, you may. That's definitely an option for making payment. There's a question about, can the financial aid offer be changed after committing? If, since it was discussed how the majority of our awards are need-based, if you did receive a Villanova grant, and let's say you do have a change in your circumstances where your income does go up, or there's a member in your household that graduates from college, so you have less people reported in college, there could be a chance if you're need-based, if your financial need changes, then the need-based award could change, which is the Villanova grant. So there is the potential for that occurring should there be a change in your financial need. There's another question here. Can each parent in a divorce situation apply for a Parent Plus loan? Yes, but if the parent of the student who did not file the FAFSA applies, we would need to confirm their citizenship. So they would have to submit documentation to us verifying that they're a US citizen. There's a comment here that there was never a receipt received for their appeal. Again, that's something I would address directly with a financial aid counselor, or you can send an email to the financial aid office and we'll be happy to look into that for you. So we'll definitely be able to clear that up in either one of those circumstances. There's a question about what is the process and timeline to expect once your award is posted and you have accepted financial aid. We usually don't post awards until closer to the start of the term. The student has to be registered and enrolled in order for us to post those awards, correct, Nate? Mm-hmm. So we're not going to be posting anything until.
So what happens is after you have gotten your, submitted your tuition deposit and you have gotten your MyNova student portal access, what'll happen is you'll go on there to accept the awards, and any of the awards that you have accepted, again, with the exception of work study, since that does not show up on the V-bill, would then be reflected on the V-bill as well.
Thank you. Go ahead, Nate, sorry.
There was a question about where the form for the any circumstances pertaining to COVID-19. If you look in the webinar chat, I provided a link for the request for a revision form. You can feel free to copy and paste that over.
There's a question about having 2 in college at the same time as reported on the FAFSA, correct? Yes, having 2 in college would be reported on the FAFSA. It also is logged on the CSS profile. They ask for your household information, but it is required to be reported on both of those forms. Nate, do you know the % of grants not renewed? I don't have that.
So unfortunately, we don't have stats on those because there are a couple of different scenarios for why a grant's not renewed. So for example, if the family member, this happened to me during my undergraduate at another university. My brother was 3 years ahead of me. So 1 year we had 2 in college. And then for the following 2 years, there's only 1 in college. So my expected family contribution did go up. So my grant had gone down based upon that calculation. So there's a couple of different scenarios based upon if the number in college changes, if the family income had significantly increased, if there were any assets, if the family had a trust that suddenly became active. There are a wide variety of scenarios. The other element is if families did not reapply for financial aid in the following year. So there are a couple of different scenarios that it's not necessarily just because there was a change in family circumstance, but the family just hadn't filed yet, for example. So there's a couple of different scenarios that kind of prevent us from getting a true percentage for that one.
Thank you, Nate. There are concerns about getting that request for revision form. Just to note, it will be included as a link in the email that you receive after this presentation, but if you go to the Villanova website and you go and search for the Office of Financial Assistance, it is listed in our important forms and documents as a request for revision for a dependent student. So either you can obtain it from the link we're going to send you, or you can go to our website and grab it. And then if ROTC scholarship is not finalized until before the fall semester begins and tuition is paid, are we reimbursed? So basically, if you've paid your bill in full and you receive the ROTC award and that's credited to the account and there's a credit on the account, then yes, you could be refunded whatever credit amount is on the student's account. You could roll it over, but if they're getting an award the following term, then yeah, you can reimburse yourself. And then there's a question, I received an appeal award. Will that be carried over year to year? So in regards to appeals, Nate, I don't believe that they are carried over from year to year because it's a different award code.
I would have to double check. We would have to follow up with that one. So for that particular question, I would set up a meeting with the just so we can review the information, because based upon the additional funding that you were awarded, we would have to check back with the appeals committee, because some funding depends upon different awards. Sometimes things are not renewable from one year to the next. If, for example, the student is required, if it's only awarded, some guidelines for scholarship funding says that this one is only for a freshman. Another one might be sophomore. Students have to be sophomore in order to be receiving that one. So some scholarships, just depending upon how the scholarship was set up by the donor, could change. So we would have to just double check based upon your individual scenario.
Thanks, Nate. Question on what is the interest rate on the $5,500 loan for freshmen? So the $5,500 loan is the subsidized or unsubsidized loan. The current interest rate is 4.76% and it's fixed, but that's going to change after June 30th of this year for any incoming or for any new borrowers. So that interest rate will change, but again, the current rate is 4.76 and it is fixed. And again, the subsidized loan, if you are eligible for it, will not accrue any interest while the student is enrolled in school.
And once we've received the official notification about what the interest rate will be for the 2020-2021 academic year, our website will be updated under the federal direct loan section. We have a piece dedicated directly about the interest rate information. So that information will also be posted as soon as that becomes available.
There's a question about disclosing specific calculations used in arriving at the Villanova EFC. I would encourage you to make an appointment with a counselor and they can go over that information with you at that time. There's a question, do I get notified if I don't receive any financial aid? I mean, anyone who applies for financial aid should be receiving some sort of notice from our office. So if you have applied, you should have received something. If you haven't, definitely set up an appointment with a counselor or email our office and we can look into that for you. Then there's another question here. What financial information is used to determine income change for Villanova grant renewal? If you use 401k withdrawals to fund, will this count against you as additional income in year 2? Well, it actually might not catch up to you until year 3 since they're using information from 2 years prior. But since it is additional income, it's going to count. However, and Nate, correct me if I'm wrong, but some schools will look at possibly excluding it if you can prove that the charges were used towards school expenses. So
yeah, that's definitely one I would recommend to set up an individual appointment with the counselor just to see what the 401k withdrawals were used for, because there are a couple of different scenarios with that one. So I would definitely recommend setting up an individual appointment just to discuss that information, because there's, as Maggie said, there's a couple of different scenarios that some pieces can be taken into account, others can't, unfortunately.
Thank you. And then we have another question here. So financial aid package was received for the student and parent loans. Do you need to do anything such as filling out more forms, or is this already done by FAFSA? So you already obtained eligibility to borrow, or excuse me, the student has already obtained eligibility to borrow through the federal direct loan program by filing their FAFSA form. If you would like to pursue a private education loan, you would need to apply for that separately. If the parent would like to apply for the Parent Plus loan, that needs to be applied for separately. The FAFSA only really guarantees you eligibility for the subsidized or unsubsidized loan amount of $5,500.
All right, well, thank you everyone so much for all of your questions and being engaged sort of with us. As you can likely see from the chat box, an email was just sent, again, that we've alluded to a few times during the conversation with some additional information and how to schedule a one-on-one appointment. So please take a moment to take a look at that. And if you feel you just have some questions that weren't able to be answered yet, we will make sure to answer those a little bit later on. So we really do appreciate you taking the time. Again, congratulations once again. We wish you the best of luck as you work to sort of make this final decision. And again, we look forward to helping you answer any questions in the coming weeks.
Thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Bye everybody.